Hello listeners, this video is on A Woman Killed with Kindness, written by Thomas Heywood. This is a stage play written in the early 17th century and a tragedy. This play was first acted in the year 1603 and was first published in the year 1607. And the play is also considered as Heywood's masterpiece, along with Arden of Faversham, which is an Elizabethan play, which comes under the subgenre of domestic tragedy. Along with that play, Heywood's play, A Woman Killed with Kindness, also falls under the subgenre of domestic tragedy. In English drama, a domestic tragedy means there is a tragic protagonist who belongs to middle class or a working class individual. The play was first performed by Worcester's Men. This is a company for which Heywood acted and wrote in the early Jacobean era. Let us see the author note. Thomas Heywood was born in the year 1570 and died in the year 1641. He was an English playwright, actor, and author. During Elizabethan and Jacobean era, he made many contributions. His masterpiece was A Woman Killed in Kindness. As I said, it is a domestic tragedy, which was first performed in 1603 at the Rose Theatre by the Worcester Men Company. Rose Theatre was an Elizabethan theatre. It was the fourth of the public theatres to be built at that time, which is after the theatre 1576. Next is the curtain 1577, and after that the rose. Let us see a small outline of this play. This play focuses on a married couple, Master John Frankfurt and his wife Annie. The action of the play centers around a house guest named Wendell, who takes advantage of John's hospitality to seduce Annie, his wife. When Frankfurt finds out, he refused to meet his wife or talk to her, and this made her down a self-destructive path of self-imposed punishment. This story is contrasted with a subplot that focuses on Sir Charles Montfort and his virtuous sister Susan, who refuses her brother's efforts to use her sexuality to get him out of debt. The play explores the themes of female sexuality, the relationship between men and women at that time during the Elizabethan and Jacobean era, and the social norms of the Elizabethan era. This play is considered to be Heywood's masterpiece, and this play is still read today and studied today. The play is taken from an Italian novel by Elizabethan, which is translated and reprinted in William Paynter's The Palace of Pleasure in the year 1566. Let us see the characters of this play. Master Frankfurt, Mistress Annie Frankfurt, who is the wife of Master Frankfurt, Sir Francis Acton, who is the brother of Annie, Sir Charles Montfort, Master Malby, Master Wendell, who is a friend of Frankfurt, Master Cranwell, who is an old gentleman. Nicholas and Jenkin are the servants of Frankfurt. Spygot, he is a butler and a servant of Frankfurt. Cicely Milkpail, who is a servant of Frankfurt. Jack Smile, Roger Brickbat are a country fellow. Joan Miniver, Jane Trupkin, Isabel Motley are a country wench. Wench is a girl or a woman who belong to a particular country. Falconer, Susan, who's Charles' sister. Sheriff, Shafton, Old Mountfort, who is Charles' uncle. Sandy, Roger, they are the former friend of Charles. Roger is his friend and also a former tenant. Tidy is Charles' cousin. Frankfurt and Annie's children. These are the characters in this play. The play has 5 acts. Act 1 has 3 scenes. Act 2 has 4 scenes. Act 3 has 3 scenes. Act 4 has 3 scenes. Act 5 has 3 scenes. Let us see Act 1 summary. It has 3 scenes. Annie and Fact 4, they are celebrating their wedding as the play starts. Annie's family members were praising her. They say that she is a suitable bride, and they also praise her that how well she had taken her marriage so far. Francis, the brother of Annie, and Charles, they arranged to go hawking and hunting the next day. Master Wendell, who is a friend of Frankfurt, and Master Cranwell, who is an old gentleman, they together bet on the men. They are Francis and Charles because they have planned to go for hawking and hunting the next day. The next morning, Francis and Charles, they argue over whose falcon did better. They then quarreled and it ended up into a fight. Falcon is a type of bird or a prey. During the quarrel and fight, Charles killed 2 of Francis' men. Immediately, he repents his anger. His sister, Susan, she encourages Charles to flee from that place so that he wouldn't be arrested. He then resolves and wanted to stay there so that he could face the consequences of his actions. Then the sheriff comes to arrest him. Sheriff means an officer of the law. Let us see Act 2 summary, which has 4 scenes. Here Frankfurt, he says how lucky he is by birth and station. He brags about his birth, saying that he has got a lovely wife. Now Wendell, he arrives with the news saying that the 2 men, Charles and Francis, were fighting. Frankfurt welcomes Wendell and takes him. Frankfurt's servant Nick, he does not like Wendell and he swears that he will refuse to serve him. Charles, who is in the prison, he is cleared of all his charges and he is charged with everything that he had. Now he is a plain countryman. Shafton, who is a friend of Charles, he offers £500 in friendship. More than friendship, he actually offered him money as a ploy to get his remaining property, which is the house which he shares with Susan. Susan is Charles' wife. So Shafton wanted to take the house where Charles and his sister Susan lives. Weldon is in love with Annie. He confesses his love to her. At first she is horrified. Gradually she begins to melt. During her husband's absence, Wendell seduces her. Nick witnesses the seduction and swears to kill Wendell for abusing his mistress. As Charles and Susan's house was taken away by Shafton, they have become poor, but they are thankful that they have a roof over their heads. Shafton, who makes an offer to Charles' house, and when Charles refuses to pay the offered amount, he is arrested for not being able to pay back the money that Shafton had lent him. Now Francis, who is the enemy of Charles, takes joy in this as he doesn't feel sufficiently revenged on Charles' death. Having this as an opportunity, he decides to seduce Susan and to disgrace both the brother and sister. But when Francis meets her, he falls terribly in love with her. Act 3 starts. It has 3 scenes. Nicholas, after the arrival of Frankfurt, he tells about Wendell and Annie. Listening to all that happened, Frankfurt, he began to believe it and works out a plan to catch them. He then moves to bed early. Susan, who's away from her brother Charles because Charles is in prison, she finds to get help from her friends and family members. Frances sends her money. Knowing this, Susan refuses it. Francis, who wanted to gain love and attention from Susan, he wants to drop the charges against her brother, and by doing this, he hopes that this kindness will bring Susan closer to him. Later, Susan and Charles are shocked to find out that their debts have been paid by Sir Francis. Susan is now surprised and impressed. She thinks that because of his love for her, he has taken away all the debts, and Charles also seems to think that by giving Susan to Sir Francis, he can repay everything to Francis. Act 4 starts. It has 3 scenes. Frankfurt and Nicholas, who's a servant of Frankfurt, they now plan to call Wendell and Annie, saying that Frankfurt has gone away. This plan is to check the actions of Wendell and Annie in the absence of Frankfurt. Now, as Frankfurt departs, Wendell convinces Annie to take dinner together. Immediately, Frankfurt and Nick, they arrive to home at night, and Frankfurt finds Annie and Wendell together. Frankfurt chases Wendell out and expresses his disappointment with his wife Annie. He then calls their 2 children and scolds her in front of them. Thereby, Frankfurt pronounces his sentence on her, telling her to take away her furniture, her clothes, and everything that belonged to her, and to choose her desired servant, and asked her to move to Manor House, which is 7 miles away, where she can live for her rest of her life in peace, and is not allowed ever again to communicate with Frankfurt or to her children. Let us see Act 5. It has 4 scenes. Charles dresses up and calls Susan and takes her to Sir Francis and declared that she will be Francis' bride and repay the debt. Knowing this, Susan resists and she prefers to die. Francis is thrilled by Charles' decision and he makes preparation for their wedding. Frankfurt made sure that Annie did not leave anything that she loved. Unfortunately, she left her lute in the house, and that makes Frankfurt worry. Nick then overtakes her to give her her lute. Cranwell, an old gentleman, he departs to Sir Francis to let him know what happened between Frankfurt and his sister. His sister is Annie. Now Annie is sad and she's on the road to move to Manor House. Nicholas, he arrives with her lute and she tells him to swear to Frankfurt that he saw her sad and that she will never eat or drink. Wendell, he encounters them in the middle of the road and comforts Annie, but Annie in return curses him. Charles, with his sister Susan and Francis, they go to visit Annie, who's on her deathbed. Now they come to see her and tell her that Frankfurt has agreed to see her. Frankfurt arrives to Manor House and forgives her. Annie then dies. Frankfurt's lament has restored the social and patriarchal order at the end of the play. The theme of this play include murder, adultery, honor, friendship, kindness, virtue, and death. Heywood has employed artistic double plots in this play. Hope this video helps. If you have query, please write it down on the comment. Do not fail to subscribe this channel for instant updates. Thank you for listening.